A remarkable job in the last 24 hours. Our Damon, Anisha Rahman, of course, Ryan Chilcote, also our guest Michael Sharf, Ali Nasser, no, I'm forgetting someone, John Alterman, and all the others who joined us, Elaine Kahano as well. Our coverage, of course, though, continues all throughout the night. CNN International will pick up broadcasting from now on. Stephen Frazier and Saddam Namdar will take up our coverage right now. Thanks for watching.
In Baghdad on what's turning to be an historic day. I'm Saddam Namdar.
I'm Stephen Frazier. They are calling it the end of a dark period as they look toward the future. Saddam Hussein executed in Baghdad by the dawn's early light.
Dancing in some streets, tears and fears in other quarters. This is our special coverage of the execution of Saddam Hussein.
Just a few months shy of 4 years now since he was driven from power, Saddam Hussein is dead. The former Iraqi dictator executed by a government formed after the country's first free elections in more than half a century. But with sectarian violence raging still, scores of Iraqis killed each week, and with December now the deadliest month of 2006 for U.S. troops who were there, how much of a difference will the hanging of Saddam Hussein actually make? We're going to begin in Baghdad, where correspondent Ryan Chilcote has been on the streets monitoring reaction. Before the streets, though, Ryan, tell us what we know about the scene in the execution chamber.
Sure. We just heard from the National Security Advisor, the Iraqi National Security Advisor, describing a chilling scene in the chamber. He said that Saddam Hussein was received by the U.S. authorities at 5:30 in the morning local time. He was led into the gallows. The National Security Advisor describing them as very efficient gallows. The executioner read out his sentence, and as the National Security Advisor said, it all happened in the blink of an eye. Very quickly, Saddam Hussein succumbing to his execution, as so many people, as the National Security Advisor would say, did before him under his rule. The National Security Advisor saying that this is a day of great importance for the Iraqi people, a day that ends a chapter of tyranny that he said that really went for 35 years in Iraqi history, describing this as an exceptionally important, so important that the Iraqi officials say they decided to execute Saddam alone as opposed to with the two other accused, the two other charged, who had been condemned to death, his half-brother and the judge of the Revolutionary Court, so that this day would forever be remembered, the 30th of December, as the day that Saddam Hussein was put to death. Stephen?
Now, Ryan, we did hear from the National Security Advisor that there was dancing around the body of Saddam Hussein by his executioners, by other officials in the government. Has it been your experience there that that kind of dancing is extending to the streets now? It seems awfully quiet in the early morning there.
You know, it is quiet. First, we are hearing some gunfire, sporadic gunfire, but it's difficult to say what that means in the Iraqi capital. As you, I'm sure, can appreciate, gunfire here is a regular occurrence. There are not that many people out on the street. Keep in mind that the religious holiday of Eid has begun in Iraq. It is a particularly important day for Sunnis here. Many of the Muslims in Iraq right now are in their homes with their families. At a minimum, if they were up all night following the execution, they may be getting their sleep now, or maybe they were sleeping in. Not too many people on the streets at this point. There were many Iraqis out on the streets shortly after the execution, responding to the execution. We did hear a lot of gunfire. That has quieted down. We expect to hear in the coming hours a lot more gunfire. It is here one way of expressing celebration. We do expect in particular Shiites and Kurds who suffered the most under Saddam Hussein to take to the streets and fire their weapons. We also expect to hear a lot of gunfire from insurgents and from Saddam loyalists and from many Sunnis who will view Saddam's execution, who do view Saddam as a victim of a Shiite-led regime. Remember, increasingly almost everything in Iraq is viewed through the lens of the state. Many Sunnis feel that this government was pursuing a Shiite agenda in executing Saddam Hussein. And what we could see is, of course, what the concern is and what the expectation among many, many Iraqis is that there will be a lot of violence on the street as Sunnis who are upset about this, insurgents, Saddam loyals who are upset about this, take to the streets to act out that violence. That's the concern. Whether Iraqis supported the execution or not, Shia, Sunni, and Kurd, they all believe that this is not going to lead in the short term or in the long term, this one event alone, to a more peaceful Iraq. Stephen?
Indeed. All right. Thank you for these insights during these early hours. Ryan Chilcote from Baghdad. 2 other men were originally sentenced to hang or just after Saddam Hussein, but the death sentences of Hussein's half-brother, Barzan Hassan al-Takriti, and former Chief Judge Awad Bandar have been postponed indefinitely now, the Iraqi government saying that it wanted this date to be associated with Saddam's death alone.
The anticipation of Hussein's execution has been high in many quarters. So what happens now? Mark Ellis, Executive Director of the International Bar Association, joins us now. Mark, you and I were talking about this earlier. So what is the legacy of Saddam Hussein trial?
Well, I think perhaps one of the most important is that the trial showed consistency in the direction of international law. And international law now is quite firm in saying we no longer can accept impunity for individuals, including heads of state, who have been accused of and who have caused these types of international crimes, been involved with international crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity. And so it's important now that individual states take the responsibility to hold these individuals accountable. And that is an important legacy for Iraq in undertaking these trials.
Did Saddam Hussein get a fair trial?
That is the key question here, because when Iraq undertook the responsibility of the trials, consistent with international law, they had to do so also consistent with international standards of fairness and impartiality. There's no question that there were administrative flaws, procedural flaws in the trial, but I don't think it reached the level where one could say it was an unfair trial. And the only exception that I've raised is the government interference, inappropriate statements, particularly from the Prime Minister's office, and interfering with the judges, actually removing judges both in the Onfel case and in the Dujail case. This, I think, will be the issue that will be debated for many years to come.
So what are the lessons learned here? If there are instances in the future, countries like Iraq, in the developing world, are they equipped, a lot of them in the Middle East, are they equipped to handle certain things like that? Based on what you're telling me right now, perhaps Iraq was not ready to take on this trial. In fact, the second trial, why did we not wait for the second trial to happen?
I think you're exactly right, and this is something that needs to be looked at and debated. I think the lesson here is that when a state does take on this responsibility to undertake these trials, but they do so in what is considered to be a conflict environment, that is probably not the appropriate way to go about it. And in addition, a state that has not had this type of experience in what are very complex cases should probably look towards a hybrid type tribunal where international jurists participate in the case itself. That was something Iraq decided not to do. That was their decision, and they had the right to do so. But it does now, I think, after watching the trial, suggest that we may learn that lesson for future trials by other states.
Hopefully we have learned those lessons. Mark Ellis, International Bar Association, thank you for your perspective.
The government of Iraq, Asiya, was at pains to point out that this was an Iraqi operation today, but the White House has already issued a statement from U.S. President George W. Bush, which reads in part, Saddam Hussein's execution comes at the end of a difficult year for the Iraqi people and for our troops. Bringing Saddam Hussein to justice will not end the violence in Iraq, but it is an important milestone on Iraq's course to becoming a democracy that can govern, sustain, and defend itself, and be an ally in the war on terror.